So far, I would say the performance is disappointing in the sense that the fan hasn't been working really at all. This is pretty cool. I've been gone for about 2 weeks since I fixed the fan, and the ceiling is amazing. It's dry. Hey, welcome back to Outbuilding. I'm gonna do a pretty short project today. This is a metal shed. This is in a coastal climate here at the cabin. And when we were doing the inspection for the property, we went in and looked, and there was this funny little pattern of straight lines on the floor in the shed, and there had a bunch of tools in there and things. And I was trying to figure out what that pattern was, and what it is condensation. So it's a super moist climate. You get air in there that's moist, and the shed warms up in the daytime with sun, and then when it cools down faster outside than the shed does inside, you get condensation in there, and it sits on the ridges of this raised panel metal roof run the length of the building, and then it drips, and you get this drip pattern in there. And since we want to be able to put a tractor and tools in there and not have things rust out, there's a couple strategies for that. One of them would be to put in a concrete pad and really get less moisture coming in from the bottom. And that's a bigger project than we're going to start with. We can go around the edge and get all the vegetation pulled away and kind of get it sloped a little bit so that there's not water just pouring in, because it doesn't really have eaves on the side. So we can get the water to kind of go kick out at the bottom and not so much get underneath. That'll minimize it a little bit. They put polyplastic in here, and that's another way to kind of keep kind of a vapor membrane. But that's going to get torn up by the tractor or other things going in and out of there, and it's sort of a lesser solution. But again, those are sort of simple concrete's pretty complicated strategy. The poly would be somewhat helpful. You could put that under gravel, but we've already got gravel in here. The third approach would be to insulate, and that's a lot of like nasty spray foams and things, and those work pretty well because you don't need a huge insulation layer. You just need enough to keep the dew point between those two temperature differentials, keep the moisture, from condensing. It will cool down overnight because this building it's got no insulation. So you could put a little insulative layer in there, and that would help. But again, that's kind of a big thing. We don't know that we'll keep this steel shed the way it is. And so we're gonna go with a really simple strategy, which is to just put a cheap solar fan up on the top. And hopefully we can get the warm, moist air that's up on top to sort of pump out with that solar fan. I'll tilt the solar panel so that it's facing kind of late afternoon sun, so it runs its best when it's like late afternoon, because it's not really an issue when when the shed's warming up. It's an issue when the shed's cooling down. So anyway, I've got this cheap little fan. I think it was under $200. I'm going to just go up and cut about a 12-inch hole and then kind of fashion the little flashing around it. I'll do it right on the top of the roof so that I don't have to worry about leakage too much. And this thing's not completely, it's already raining in there, so it's not going to be a big issue if I get a little leak here and there, but I'll do the best I can. Drop that fan on. That's an easy hole to patch if later that's not the right way to go. But we'll let that fan run and see what it does. So this is kind of part one of this video. I may post this and then through the winter see how it's performing and see if we're still getting that condensation in there and see if it's making a big difference. Since we haven't been in this property before, I can't tell you what it does year to year, but we can at least look at it over the season. This is where I'm filming this in kind of the early fall when things are just starting to cool down a little bit. So I think in the summer, it was not an issue at all. Anyway, so I'll go up and do some sheet metal tin work, and I'll do a quick time lapse of that. And then we'll see how this thing performs. While I was doing this, these are my grandfather's old metalworking tools, and he used to be a sheet metal worker on large buildings, particularly oil field things in like Wyoming back in the 80s. And I'm sure he'd be both kind of pleased to know that I'm using his tools and also horrified to watch me use them. So anyway, thanks, Grandpa. All right, so here's this widget. It's a fan on the bottom. Fits over that snout that I just put in. It's got a mesh grill. It's for the discharge, and then it just sits on there. And then I can open up these little things and tilt up the solar panel. So the solar panel will power it, and gotta figure out how to orient it. This is facing due south, which will give it the best light in the wintertime, but I think I want to twist it a little bit to the west because I want to get the afternoon light, and I'll tip it up pretty far so that it sort of runs hardest in the late afternoons. And then I might not screw it down yet. I might just let it be, or put one little screw in and see how it performs, and then maybe adjust it. Hey, well, here's a sort of a winter update on this shed. So far, I would say the performance is disappointing in the sense that the fan hasn't been working really at all, and I'll get to that and why that is, and I've figured out a way to fix it, so hopefully that improves. But I've got, if you look on the floor, you can see these drip lines, and it's not terrible. I think it's actually better than it was, and I've got it much better lit in here. And you can see that it's sort of, the ground is dried out up back to kind of just this back corner, and that's actually been improving through the winter. So I think it was really pretty wet underneath the plastic that they had in here, and it's slowly drying out. We have been out, probably once a week or maybe slightly more frequently, and had the door open and had it kind of aired out. And I think that's helping kind of vent out some of the moisture that was accumulated in here. Not sure if you can see on the ceiling, but it's shiny and it's quite drippy. Right now it's about 42 degrees out and the dew point is 39. So it's really close to the dew point. And that's what happens out here a lot, is the dew point sits right around the ambient temperature. So if you get a little bit of a difference between the outside of the building and the inside of the building around that dew point, you get that moisture accumulating up on the roof. And this is pretty common. You can see the fan up there, and I'm going to crawl up and I'm going to show you what the fix is. There's a thermostat in the fan, and the thermostat keeps the fan off until it gets to a certain, it's basically used as kind of intended to be an attic fan, and so it's wanting to clear out warm air up in an attic. Here we want to clear out moist air even when it's cold out, and so I disabled the thermostat, and I'll show you how that works. All right, so I called the vendor of the fan, and there's this little white connector here, and it's just, when it's plugged in, it enables the thermostat, and when you unplug it, it disables the thermostat. And the thermostat's really only just this really small piece of wire here, so it's just a little sensor, and what it does is it disables the operation of the fan. So what happened is when I first installed it in the winter, or in the summer rather, it worked great, and it would come on during the day and run pretty hard. And then as it started to cool off, in the fall, it would start to come on and only run for a minute until it cooled down the air around it, and then it would shut off, so it was cycling on and off. And that's when I thought it was starting to fail, but it was just the thermostat. Nowhere did it say in the instructions there was a thermostat in it. So by disabling the thermostat now, it just runs, and it runs really pretty slow when it's not a lot of light out. It's dark right now because it's morning early, but as the sun comes out, it'll start to run slowly and then speed up as the sun gets brighter. And that's actually what we want, because we want it to run harder when there's more moisture, or rather when there's more warmth. It'll be interesting to see how this works now. I just did this. It's early January. It's been raining close to an inch a day, and so we will give it a whirl here with the fan running and see if that doesn't improve things over time. All right, we got a nice morning with a little bit of sun shining, and I'll show you what that looks like on the fan side. So hopefully you can see here, the fan is spinning up and then slowing down, spinning up and slowing down, but it's running, and it'll spin faster and faster depending on how bright the sun is. Right now it's not very bright out, it's just barely hitting the panel. Now you can see with the sun on the panel, it's running really well, and it's pulling quite a bit of air. So this is just what you want. When the garage is warm, you want to be pulling as much air as you can out, because that's really moisture-laden air as it gets warm, and it'll help dry out. And it's going to be pulling in colder air, which has less moisture in it. So hopefully, letting this run, week in, week out here when the garage is closed, it'll help kind of dehumidify the garage a little bit. I don't think it's going to be magic, but it will be helpful. All right, little update here. This is pretty cool. I've been gone for about 2 weeks since I fixed the fan. I showed you that, and the fan is lightly spinning now, but it's been, I can't explain, it's been just raining every single day. We had a massive ice storm. Not here, thankfully, but inland, and it's just been super wet. Our water supply is like overflowing. So it's been plenty moist out here, and the dew point I've been watching has been hovering right around the ambient temperature. So this thing has been shifting in and out of dew point. And the ceiling is amazing. It's dry. Whatever combination of things, I'm hoping it's the fan. I'm hoping that was improving it. That fan probably hasn't been able to spin at full speed because it hasn't been that sunny out here other than probably occasionally, but it has been circulating air, and that may be all it took, was just enough to get that moist air out. So what's going on, I think, is that the colder air is coming into this warm room. It warms up and it can take on a bunch of moisture, and it gets expelled out of the top vent there with a little bit of activation from that solar fan. And so that's drawing moisture out. It's essentially slowly dehumidifying the shop, which is great. There's really no water on the tracks on the floor haven't recreated themselves, so it hasn't been dripping in here. There's one drip right on the center of the tractor, and that's just because there's a downright leak in the ceiling. And that is the fact it's introducing water and still not getting moist in here is really encouraging. So the main things we did is we took off the plastic that was on the ground. We found a whole bunch of roots that had grown in under the building, and so I don't know if they were bringing moisture in or trying to take moisture out, but we took out all those roots, just kind of graded this out, and the gravel's been drying to the back of the garage. We've been in here probably once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks, and we've been opening it up and venting it, and that's probably helping too. But I think the fan, just notably different from when I was here 2 weeks ago to now. All right, so it's no longer raining in the shed. That's awesome. Couple things to note. This was about a $220 fan. I think that's what they are commercially available now. I'll put a link to this in the description below. There may be others like it. When I looked online, there was many vendors that were selling something that looked pretty similar. There was that little trick of trying to unplug the thermostat, and so that's a key thing. If you look back in the video, you can see how I did that. With the thermostat, it would only come on when it was super warm out, and so in the wintertime now, it wasn't running at all. I actually thought the fan was defective, but it turns out it was just that thermostat that wasn't listed really in the instructions. Anyway, disable that thermostat. It'll run continuously when it's sunny out, regardless of the temperature, and that's what I wanted here. We had taken on a building that had probably been really left dormant for years, and so it had a lot of baked-in moisture in the ground. But then that roof fan really made a big difference once we took the thermostat off and got it running. It seems to have really dried up the room. There's no more condensation on the roof. And this has been like, I just looked yesterday and it was, I think the dew point was 50 degrees and the temperature swing was going from 49 to 51. So it was right across the dew point, and it would have been condensing in there if there's any differential. We've had a ton of rain the last few weeks and it's staying dry in here. So that's great. If that helps you with your shed, give one of these fans a try. They're pretty inexpensive, and it's a fairly easy install to put that on, as you saw. I hope this has been helpful. If it's been helpful, consider subscribing or sharing it with friends. We'll have other tips as we learn things about this property and how we get these outbuildings working. Until I next see you, I'll be out building. Thanks for watching.